Lingen. I was in Lingen Alps last year.
In Tromsø.
In Tromsø, exactly. Yeah. You want to see photos?
Yeah, sure. I actually studied in Tromsø, so I know all about them and the Northern Lights as well.
It's actually not a bad place to study. Tromsø itself is not a bad place to study. I think actually it's not a terrible place to be a student. But here, let me, if you want to, are you able to do screen sharing?
Yeah, I think so. There's yeah, on the bottom of the screen there should be a share the screen button.
See here. So do I have a screen share here? This is the first time I've used. Let's see. Where is it? Bildschirm übertragen. Is that it? Yeah, I think. Do you see my screen here?
Yeah, and now I can see your screen. Lingen, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
So that is actually a director of Berkshire Hathaway. He came with us. Can you see the photos I'm sharing?
Yeah, I can see them.
That's Chris Davis, and this is us on I don't know, some island or other. But it's just spectacular landscapes, just amazing. And then one day we went to the border between maybe this was this day. We went to the border between Sweden, Finland, and Norway. There in the middle of the wherever the fact it is. But that, like something like this, I mean, that's once in a lifetime landscapes. It's just unbelievable. I mean, I was as you can see, I really enjoyed it. But anyway,
it's called Kilpisjärvi.
Whatever that means. But I can tell you, I've been in the Antarctic, and I'd prefer here Lingen than to go into the Antarctic because this is so much more interesting and so much more fun. There's life, there's people, there's ships, but you have the same, kind of mountains disappearing into the sea, which is just an unbelievable thing. It's very, very beautiful. I mean, I'm so glad I was able to do that, actually. So glad. But
was it your first time in Norway, or?
I have I don't know. You may not, he's not that famous, but I have a very, very good friend from business school who planned that trip for us. He's a guy called now I'm blanking on his name, of course. Anders Vide, and he lives in Oslo, but he's from Bergen. And during business school already, we had a ski trip, a group of friends, where we went to Geilo, which is halfway between Oslo and Bergen, as I understand. And so I actually learned telemark. I mean, I don't telemark very well, but I learned a little bit of telemark there. And, it was so beautiful. I mean, there were these mountain huts and, I remember on New Year's Eve, we put on cross-country skis to go visit friends. It was like sort of, I don't know, a kilometer or two to a friend's house. But so I guess I have been to Norway, and Oslo. I've maybe spent 3 nights in Oslo in my life, but Oslo feels very much like Zurich. Very organized, well-ordered place. All that jazz. So, but we should have I presume there's a podcast. We can do all this live, so we could just get going and have the same conversation live, and people can.
We're actually recording right now.
Fine. Okay, so you can. But if you want to be, I don't know if you need to do an introduction or anything, but
we'll do that as well. We'll just have a sound check. I'm gonna look at the sound waves and so on, and then we'll just get going.
Yeah, this is my first time recording on Discord, actually. Does Discord do separate sound channels for the recording and all that jazz?
Yes, it does.
Really?
Yeah.
So not like Zoom, which has a single channel.
It's one sound wave for you, one channel for you, one for Kenneth, and one for me.
Wow, that's amazing. So it kind of like, anyway, those websites that do special podcasting and they record the local channel, Discord does that for you, basically.
Yeah, and it
So
does it for free as well.
that's amazing. That made. I mean, I don't like the design of Discord. I feel like it's too. Anyway, it felt spammy to me in the past, but I can see that a lot of people use it. You know.
Yeah, you can see
Yeah.
we have a huge community here as well. So
Yeah, almost. Is this your? Oh, that's your stock up community. It just feels so noisy to me. The interface, it feels so noisy. I used to try and use Slack, and Slack is basically the same thing as Discord. It seems to me, but I don't like the design of Discord. It's just noisy, But anyway,
Check it out. Check out Slack. I haven't tried it before, but I've heard many use it.
I mean, the thing is, what happens with all these things is like, if you're on Discord and your community's on Discord, but you're fucking done, man, because you're not going. There's so much buy-in, there's so much lock-in that
Yeah.
you're not going to Slack.
Oh, probably not. Yeah.
Guy, I'm just gonna look over the recording that we've done, and then we'll just get started.
Yeah, actually, and also, I don't know if you care that much about sound quality. I can record locally if you like.
Yeah, sure. It's always nice to have a backup system. We have two bots recording as we speak right now.
Yeah. So hold on. Yeah, I'm doing a local recording now as well, so you can get perfect sound, because we have this special mic and stuff. What can I say?
Yeah, super.
Yes, seems very professional. The information and opinions expressed in this show should be considered as entertainment and for educational purposes only. We're here to inform, enlighten, and make you laugh, but we're not giving financial advice. Any information in this episode should not be relied upon while making investment decisions. If you're looking for financial advice, please consult with a professional financial advisor. The hosts and guests may or may not hold positions in the securities we discuss.
I think that. Do you guys put this up on YouTube?
No.
You know what amazes me about YouTube is that it's a discovery mechanism. So many people, if the algorithm is so powerful, and they prevent you from looking at the videos you want to look at, and they put up things that they think will be relevant. They talk a lot about TikTok and that algorithm, but I think that YouTube has a pretty powerful algorithm themselves, just subjectively. How they do it, and you may find that if you decide to put up a YouTube channel and put up old videos, you'll get a lot of people who discover you, for what it's worth, if you care.
Yeah, we do care. The thing is, Guy, we live in Norway, and I don't know. Yeah, we have beautiful landscapes, beautiful nature, beautiful people, and so on. But we have large taxes, and there is no incentive to actually invest in stocks. You get killed.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, we actually started something beautiful, because we have actually started a wave of kind of new retail investors looking to grow their mindset and buy into companies that will just keep compounding, which I know you are a huge ambassador for.
Yeah, I wish I wasn't such a huge ambassador. I don't need the competition,
Well, Mr. Spier, all the sound waves on all of us seem perfect, especially on you. You have I think you have the most expensive microphone, so I think
yeah, it damn well be good for the price, huh?
Yeah. So it looks marvelous. So have you had a look at the questions we wanted to ask?
I mean, there are a lot of them, and they're all really, really good. So you're free to ask any of them. I don't think we'll get through all of them, but you can go in any order you like. And I glanced through and I thought, yeah, great questions. I hope I'm able to answer them.
Yeah, I have to say before we start that you are to huge inspiration for a lot of our listeners in our community. And I've read your book actually twice. Once 10 years ago and one more time now before the podcast. And your book ranks among my all-time favorites for anyone looking to grow as an investor. And one quote that specifically resonates with me is this from your book is, "This became my own goal, not to be Warren Buffett, but to become a more authentic version of myself, as he had taught me the path of true success is through authenticity." For me, it's a powerful reminder of the value of self-discovery in the pursuit of success, Mr. Spier, I have to say.
Yeah. Well, please call me Guy, by the way. I mean, it's very nice of you to call me Mr. Spier, but it's okay. You know the famous story of that it's true. At the Warren Buffett lunch, I was super nervous, was calling Warren Buffett Mr. Buffett. And to his left and his right are Monish Pabrai's daughters. And he looks at me and he says, "Listen, I know by the end of the lunch you'll be calling me Warren, and Monish's daughter's already calling me Warren. So why don't you just start now calling me Warren? It'll be a lot easier for you and for me. And so you should do the same thing and call me Guy." But I mean, look, first of all, I mean, I just finished a book yesterday by a professor at Columbia called Amar Bide. And, you know, those professors, academics like that, write about substantive topics. Where I'm reading a book right now by a German professor at University of Zurich on the history of the Renaissance. And those guys they know a lot about the world, and they teach me about the world. And when I got the book contract, I knew that the only thing that I could do was write about myself, because that's the only thing that I really was authoritative about. Everything else I had kind of not really very good knowledge, nothing to teach anybody about. So in a sense, what you see in the book is a guy who has gotten a book contract, who's shit scared because he wants to write something meaningful, not write a kind of another useless book that nobody wants to read. And so the reason why I wrote about myself is that I knew that that's something I could be authoritative about. And I you know, that idea about being an authentic version of oneself, I mean, I'm sure I'd already read it. The idea, I mean, what I do in the book is no different in a way to so many other works of literature, though mine's not a work of literature, that succeed, is that they transmit the basic message that, you know, the only goal in life is to be true to your own self and not to anything else. I mean, there's this Shakespeare quote, "To thine own self be true." That's Polonius speaking to his son Hamlet, I believe, in Denmark, not so far away from you, or at least similar cultural landscape. And so, in a way, I before I hand the mic over to you again, like, it's not surprising that it resonates, because in a way that's the only thing that resonates in all of world literature. And the hero's journey or the inner journey is the only journey that counts. And the why it resonates for you is that it's actually exhorting you to give up on trying to be somebody else and start trying to be yourself. And in some way, maybe the book also, it kind of says, well, if this schmuck can do it, because I spent a lot of time in the book demonstrating to the reader what a schmuck I am, then the reader goes, well, holy fuck, you know, he's a human. He's messed up in many ways, and so maybe if he can do it, therefore I can do it as well. You know, so so what am I trying to say? In a way, there's nothing. It's so kind of you to say that you read the book then and you read it now and it's been inspiration. In a way, the only way the book succeeds in being an inspiration is that it holds up a mirror to the reader, and it kind of says, you know, you actually need to do your own inner journey. And I think that what I would tell you, though, from the perspective of today, so what happens with the book often is that people want to meet the guy who wrote the book, and the guy who wrote the book, the book is now at least 10 years old, if not more. And I'm a different person to the person I am today. And I can think that what's, it's a challenge for all of us, is that I'm very, very capable of being the person I was, true to the person I was 10 years ago. Am I capable of being true to the person I am today, and what I'm called to be today, which is different to what I'm called to be in 10 years ago? And I'll just give you, and then I'll shut up and see where you go from here, is that, I mean, it's something that and I'm edging my way slowly towards this. I mean, if you have any degree of success in investing, and I know that's a big if, you'll end up having more money than you need. And I think that many of us, provided we don't want to own, Trump airplanes and big yachts and things like that, already have more than we need. And then, the question is, why are you going for more money? And that is a question that I'd like to ask a lot of people who are sort of like these super successful investors. And I want to ask them, why are you trying to get richer? You're already a billionaire. And what is that the most meaningful thing that you have to do in your life? And I can say that at the end of that, I've now referred to that lunch with Warren Buffett. I mean, in a way, Warren Buffett have been a big hero for me. He's a genius. He's he's certainly up to now the most successful and best investor who's ever lived. He may be that for the rest of time. But the question that I would have asked of him just before the end of the lunch was, is that all your life's going to be about? Making more and more money, being the richest man or close to the richest man on the planet, and giving it all away? There's so much more you could do with your life. You could write a book. You could write many books. You could read a whole bunch of history. You could read a whole bunch of literature. And I realized at the end of the lunch that in a certain way, Warren Buffett's on the one hand this genius. On the other hand, he has a very narrow set of interests. He's in a way a very narrow person. He was being very, very true to himself by focusing on that, because that's all he really loves to do. I think of myself, and I think, I showed you photographs just now of me skiing in Lingen Alps. I mean, I wouldn't give up my last penny to have skied in the north of Norway. But if you already have 2 billion, let's say, just for argument's sake, would you give up the 3rd billion to have had that incredible experience for a week skiing in Norway? I think you probably should. So why are all these investors trying to get richer and richer? It's kind of anathema to me. And I have to say that it's something that I'm struggling less and less with, because I'm making changes in my life to make sure that I don't become that. I hope the meandering path is one that my thoughts have followed, is one that you've been able to follow as well.
Absolutely. And before we go over to the questions, I would like to do a proper introduction of you, Mr.
Sorry about that. I thought we're straight into it. Go ahead, blast away.
So, guys, sorry, I'm really nervous. We're absolutely delighted to introduce a truly inspiring guest to the podcast, Mr. Guy Spier. Guy is a renowned investor and author who has made a profound impact in the world of value investing. Based in Zurich, he is the brilliant mind behind the Aquamarine Fund. Guy once bid $650,000 alongside Monish Pabrai to have lunch with Warren Buffett. He's also the author of the deeply personal and insightful book, The Education of a Value Investor, where he goes through his transformation from a Wall Street hotshot to a principled investor on a quest for wealth, wisdom, and enlightenment. Beyond his investing prowess, Guy is a generous thinker, a podcast host himself, and someone who brings a rare blend of intellect and heart to everything he does. We're thrilled to have him here today to share his story and insights with us. Welcome, Guy.
Yeah, that's a very, very warm welcome, and thank you very, very much. And if it makes you feel any better, I was so nervous before that famous lunch with Warren Buffett. I was actually sick because I lost sleep, and I was just like I so wanted it to go well, and I wanted him to like me. So I know that feeling, and but please get rid of it. You just need to be yourself. As we were saying just before the introduction, you just need to be true to yourself is what you need to do. No more than that,
Thank you. It's a huge relief for you saying that. So I haven't actually slept that well last night because I was actually really nervous. This is actually I've never been nervous to an exam or anything, or doing surgery on patients and so on. But this is really up there. So I think that's the biggest compliment I can give another person.
Well, I just hope I meet your expectations because, is I forgive me for the colorful language. I shit brown just like everybody else, So
Yeah, that's
I love the quote by this apparently the first the only female prime minister of Israel, Golda Meir. She said to her cabinet, all males, at some point she said, "Don't be so humble. You're not that great," So, which is kind of like a double whammy. It's like sort of saying, in my case, you're giving me too many compliments, and I'm not that great, and so I should accept them happily and not humbly because I'm not that great, and I really am not actually. And look, we talked about it a little bit. In a way, it's interesting. I got myself into a really neat spot with the book because I come over. I keep tearing myself down in the book and revealing my all too human flaws in the book, and somehow people like the person who wrote the book just the same and feel like they have something to learn from it. And so I got myself into a neat spot in the world where I can continue to be humble. I can continue to point out my human failings, and at the same time people are still interested in paying attention, and I can get benefit from that. So I think that most people, or many people, get themselves into a corner where they feel like in order to justify themselves in the world, they need to show how great they are. And for me, it's kind of the opposite in a way. I need to just can keep revealing how useless I am, and people somehow want to pay attention. I really, maybe I can ask you why. I mean, the bottom line is, and I just to be clear, you say that I'm a brilliant investor, and boy, I take every compliment you'll give me happily. But I think I'm just an average investor. I really do, and that's borne out by the numbers. I mean, I'm barely beating over the life of my fund. I'm barely beating the S&P. And over the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, I have not beaten the S&P. I've continued to compound, but so I don't think I'm that great, or I think the evidence shows that I'm not that great, actually. So I have no idea why the world pays attention to me. And I've been learning, and I'll stop after saying this. I've been learning a little bit about narcissism and the narcissistic personality. And one of the books that I read kind of like put narcissism on a scale from 1 to 10. So the healthy narcissist is it's a very short test you can take. Is between 4 and 6. 1 and 3 is kind of the opposite of a narcissist. It's the echo. It's the person who provides narcissistic supply. And then kind of like 7, 8 is extremely narcissistic but still normal. And 9, 10 is like maybe Trump levels of narcissism that you really need to rein it in one way or another, and can cause serious dysfunction. So the part of me, I think that I'm about a 7 or an 8, 6, 7, 8. I'm reasonably narcissistic but still normal. So the part of me that likes the attention, of course, enjoys the attention, but I really do ask myself, why so much attention on me? Because I'm not that great, really. I'll stop there and see where you go with the conversation. I hope I'm making sense to your audience.
Yeah, definitely. And we humbly disagree. like we just checked the FinChat overview, and I think you're on the top 20 most popular investors there, above Terry Smith and all those guys. So you're doing good stuff, and you get continuous recognition for it. And I'm hoping that we could get some good learnings today. So I'll just we touched a little bit on it initially on the subject of growth. That you touched into, okay, if you have 2 billion, why go for the third? So, I mean, it's very inured in us that we have a growth mindset, right? As a human species, you have something, you want more. If you have nothing, you want something. But when do we stop? And I think that's a very good question. When do we stop and put more value to not maybe stuff that's easily measurable in money, but in happiness? And like for me, it's really important that my family is safe and secure and stuff like that. My children, I have very small children, and I spend a lot of time with them. But for these very rich individuals that have those 2 billions, what do they look for, and how do they find reasonable growth avenues? And yeah. So how do you think about those stuff, those things? Because I mean, we have understood that you have a good community around you with great investors. And what are you guys doing?
First of all, just to be clear, I don't have 2 or 3 billion, and but I have enough. I have probably a tenth of that, or less than a tenth of that, but it's enough for sure for one lifetime. I think that Warren Buffett is the first person who reframed it for me. So, a lifetime is just a series of connected present moments, and everybody here, to the extent that I'm older than everybody on this call, then everybody here has richer than me in terms of a series of interconnected moments, and I'm richer than Warren Buffett because his moments on the planet are very likely to be less than mine. And so, I mean, that's one thing that, I mean, it's a well-known idea that the time has just been taken away from you. And I'll just give you another idea that is well known as this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, and diminishing returns to scale. How many steaks can a man eat? Once you've eaten 1 steak a day, or I can't imagine somebody even wanting to eat 2 steaks a day, you're kind of done. You don't need any more, and no amount of money. Or the opposite, you can have all the money in the world, but you're in the middle of the desert and you can't find water, and all that money in the world doesn't help you. So it's a guy called Collier. I don't remember the name of the book. I don't remember the first name of the guy, but he first introduced me in a lecture at a Harvard Business School reunion of this idea of, our balance sheet is multidimensional, and it's not just about money. It's about how many experiences you've collected up, your psychological wealth, how deep and multifaceted is your relationship to your wife and your children, and all of those things. And I think that we really ought to be all building that side of the balance sheet from day one, even if we don't have even if our financial wealth is not where it should be, because that's more enduring. And I leave you with I think 2 thoughts before I hand the mic back to you, and I'm having a sort of like a senior and blank moment. It'll come back to me, I'm sure. I don't remember what I was going to say. It was going to be really good, but I'll give the mic back to you, and maybe it'll come back to me. We'll see.
I think what Kenneth was reflecting on was we as human beings don't want to stagnate. If you won world championship in, let's say, soccer, the next goal should be to win 2, if you know what I mean. strive for the next big thing, I think.
What I mean, so I've been through some experiences over the last year or two that suddenly realize, I mean, I'm about to turn 60 next year. I think part of what you're saying is actually just, and suddenly I realize that I'm looking at life from a different end. I have more of my life behind me than I have in front of me. And suddenly at some point, actually, from where I'm looking at it, you don't want more. If you won one soccer championship, you've had enough. Or, if you have 3 children or 2 children, or however many you manage to have, you don't want a third child. You're done with what you have. And I can certainly say that, there's some people who have multiple marriages. I'm done with one marriage. I don't ever, the person I am today doesn't want to ever go through a second marriage. So I'm not sure that you always want more. And I think that a lot of what the kind of like what we're exploring here is really just looking at things from a different perspective. I think if you have a portfolio of, $10,000, $100,000, you look at it differently than if you have a portfolio of $64 billion or whatever it is that Warren Buffett's net worth is these days. And the person who has, you can't actually tell the difference. You can't understand the enormous difference of perspective and the different considerations that go into what you're thinking about in your life when you have that different perspective. And there are many different ways of looking at that. I mean, if you're a soldier in an army, I was having this conversation yesterday, you have a very, very different perspective than the general in the army who has 100,000 soldiers at his disposal, even though you're ostensibly fighting the same war. The guy who's building his portfolio and has been doing it for a year or 2 or 3 is a very, very different perspective for somebody who has billions or hundreds of millions or has been doing it for 20 years, and he sees it differently. My perspective is one of somebody I've got a little bit more than a 10x on my lifetime of investing. That's 26, 27 years. But the original dollar that was invested with me is now 10x. That is a completely different part of the world that I'm living in to somebody people that I've talked to who've just started investing their portfolio and they're looking at a 20% return on their total assets or a 40% return, which is still wonderful, but they still wonder what would happen if it went down 50%, for example. So that, and I'll just give you one other example of that just for fun. The bond markets dwarf equity markets, for example. And there are people who talk about, for example, interest rates and what's going on in the global economy, or what happened in a particular section of the bond market. And the amounts of money involved, the notional amounts, are enormous. But if you're an equity investor, you see it completely differently. And you can't really, they talk about the same thing, but it's kind of apples to oranges. But you don't see that when the person is talking about it. Forgive me, I'm going to give you another example of that, how perspective is so important. You see somebody, you see a portfolio, and you might see it on your social media. And it happens to me all the time because people think they're looking at my whole portfolio, but there are many positions that I don't report. There are a whole bunch of positions that I'm not required to report that are not inside the United States. The only thing I'm really required to report is inside the United States. So, and they think that's my whole portfolio, but it's not. And somebody will say, oh, I bought a lot of XYZ stock today, but they don't say that it's actually with 1% of their net worth. And somebody looks at it and says, oh my God, that guy is really bullish on this company. But he's actually not that bullish. He's just saying something because in terms of his own total net worth, it doesn't make a big difference. Or, forgive me for going on about this, somebody will talk about how they're fully invested in some venture capital fund or some company, but they don't say that 99% of their net worth is in their real estate, for example. So that difference of perspective, what you're actually coming at it from, it makes a huge, huge difference to how you think about it. Am I making any sense to you?
Yeah, you certainly are, and that's why I know you have spoken about this on several podcasts, the time arbitrage on the subject of time in investing in broader sense. We have read that your average holding period is 21 years, which Chantal confirmed to me before this podcast, which is actually massive and really interesting. Well, we are kind of curious of what you need to see in a company for it to deserve such a long holding time. What are the common characteristics for a great long-term in investment?
I mean, I just wanted to give a different perspective before I try and answer that question.
Sure.
So, another way of looking at that is for the outside investor to say, two of your two holdings that you've had in your fund since inception include Berkshire Hathaway and Nestle, and they say, why the fuck, excuse my language, why the hell should I pay you to hold Nestle and Berkshire Hathaway for me? I can do that on my own. I don't need to be that smart. I can go to the Berkshire Hathaway meeting. I can read the annual report. There's so many books written about Warren Buffett, so much I can learn about him. Why do I need you to do that for me? And the bottom line is the honest answer is that the outside investor doesn't need me to do that for him. I don't think, probably. And my response to that is, yeah, you're absolutely right. And the only reason why you would invest with me is because I make it worth your while, because I reduce my fees to such a low level that you're not paying me practically anything to run your money. And that again is a kind of a change in perspective. So one thing that's important, because I run a fund that is both my family portfolio and close family, but also outside investors, the only reason why I continue to be able to own sort of like no-brainer or not difficult decisions to make is because I work hard as I can to reduce the fees that they pay and reduce them basically to close to zero. I have to really outperform in a major way in order for me to make any serious amount of money off those investments. But then when you go to the investments themselves, one of the experiences that I had is the realization, and I know that Warren Buffett's been there a long time already, that the decisions that I make, I may not be able to see the fruits of those decisions. I may not be around because the decisions may unfold over longer than I will be alive. And there's a quick story there before I go to the specifics of the investments. So the man is sitting on his estate, beautiful estate, and he's a very, very old man. And he tells the gardener, he's looking out at a beautiful view and there's a beautiful lawn. And he says, I'd really like an oak tree in that view. And so he tells the gardener, I want you to plant an oak tree so that it will grow and it will make a beautiful view from where I'm sitting. And the gardener tells him, but sir, you're a very old man and the oak tree will take 50 years to grow. And so you'll most likely not be alive to see it when it's grown. Wouldn't you like me to do something else that maybe will make your view more beautiful in your lifetime? And the man says, well, if it's going to take 50 years to grow, then you might as well get right on away and do it before the day is out, because we have not got a second to wait type of deal, which is kind of like, again, this very, very different time perspectives. But I think that going to the specifics of investments, I see many investments where I can reasonably say, you know what? So, we know the trades, people who say, oh, it's clear that XYZ is going to outperform because their earnings are going to surprise on the upside. And for the next 18 months, this is going to be a great thing to hold. And I think that many of us are aware that if you want to be a successful long-term investor, you don't want to go for those kinds of ideas. There's many other ideas where kind of like you talk about the 3 to 7 year time frame, where people say, look, I think that I can see out 3 to 7 years, and I think it's going to be a lot better 3 to 7 years out. And I realize that more and more the only thing that I want to have in my portfolio are beyond that. It's like 7 to 50 years out, the man planting the oak tree. And what do those ideas look like? And one idea that comes to mind is this idea that, I don't know who said it, culture eats strategy for breakfast. If you're looking 5 to 50 years out, you want the culture to be right. Strategy maybe doesn't matter anymore. And three companies that I think that we would all, they're all super highly valued, but we'd all be happy to have them in our portfolios, which these are companies that really, really care about the corporate culture. One is not publicly traded, is IKEA. And you know IKEA because it's a Swedish company, and I know that we're in Norway here, so we have to say that we hate the Swedes or something like that. But anyway, it's not that far away, and the Swedes aren't that different from you. But actually, through some strange coincidence, a lawyer that I know has spent time with the founder, who's no longer around, and I can't remember his name, but they were driving somewhere in Switzerland, and he stopped at a petrol station. And he was looking for the cheapest chocolate bar, and like that, this guy is worth billions, and his culture of looking for the cheapest deal he can get, even though he's worth billions, is really surprising to me, because I don't live my life that way. But two other companies that have that kind, maybe three. So Costco has that kind of culture. I believe that Berkshire Hathaway has that kind of culture. And I do believe that Nestle, through all its ups and downs, and it's going through a bit of a down right now, has that kind of culture. So I think that's what I'm looking for more and more in my portfolio. And I'm looking less for kind of trades. I mean, I don't know when this is going to go out, but I know that Monish Pabrai, my bidding partner for the launch, laid out a very, very clear and very well described rationale for his strategy, or his reasons why he was investing in coal companies. And it's a capital-starved industry with not a lot of capital flowing towards it. Should have very high returns on capital and should make very good investments. But that's a kind of like a 3 to 7 year type trade, if you like. It's not a 7 to 50 year kind of trade. And I do have that in my portfolio, but I find myself wanting to own less of that, if you like. So I don't know. Have I answered the question? Am I making any sense?
Most definitely. And we wanted to maybe dig a bit deeper in how do you identify these great cultures?
Yeah, exactly. How does one identify those great cultures? And I love answering questions like that with a kind of what I'm about to do, and then I'll try and answer it more fully, as I say, with great difficulty. So I think the one thing to say is it is difficult. It's not. Don't pretend that it's easy. Don't pretend that you're going to wake up one day and just have this light bulb idea and there it is. That's the one thing. So acknowledging the difficulty of doing it is a part of the journey. I really like when Warren Buffett, and he said it more than once, like he's asked in some format, how do you go about your research? And he says, start with the A's, And I think that, of course, he doesn't really mean start with the A's. But what I interpret that to mean is once you've acknowledged the difficulty, you examine any data that is going to help you get to your end goal, or you think will help you to get to your end goal, but you do it intelligently, meaning that you start with the A's, but the minute you've got a better way of doing it, then you start using that. And I find it really interesting how you guys are in Norway, so I don't know where I heard this first, but I don't know how many Eskimo that you have contact with in Norway. I guess people who live but apparently in Eskimo speak, there's at least 20 names for different kinds of snow. There's snow that's just fallen. There's snow there's a crusty layer on top. There's snow that's windblown. There's snow that's melted. There's like 1,000 different kinds. 1,000, at least 20. In most parts of the world, in the English language, people only know one kind of snow. It's snow. And so the more you dive into a subject, the more what looks to somebody else just to be one thing, you see all the differentiations, if you like. And so the answer is, with great difficulty, and you keep looking and you keep looking and you keep learning and you keep finding tools and ideas that maybe help you to get to those results. And I think that, I mean, I'm doing this now for 27 years, something like that. And I still, if it makes you feel any better, the vast majority of times, all of the times practically, where I figure something out, either Warren Buffett or some other market participant has already figured it out ahead of me. And so there's no point really buying in volume because it's fully priced. So it's really, really hard. And if you find, and a lot of the times when you think you found a gem, it's probably not a gem because the market is an extremely picked over place. And I'm not really answering the question. I'm just saying that it's hard. But I think that, so for example, I go to the Berkshire Hathaway meeting. I go there to adulate and pray and worship at the altar of Warren Buffett. But I'm also there because from the minute I board the plane to the minute I get back to Zurich, there are multiple conversations I have. And I'll give you one minor sort of like insight that I had. So there's this guy, Frederick Wolf. Frederick Wolf runs Markel, the insurance company's business in Europe. And so I'm boarding the plane from Omaha to Chicago, and from Chicago I'm gonna fly back to Zurich. He's gonna fly back to Munich. I think that's where he lives. And he's sitting up in the front of the plane. So we're both traveling business. And I said to him, I talked to him about the fact that John Elkann had sold in Exor his stake in PartnerRe. And I said to him, I live in Zurich, and Switzerland is not the rest of the EU. And I just dream of the idea of finding some small insurance company in Switzerland and maybe getting it in a canton like Zug or some of the smaller cantons where I can get the right regulatory structure the way Warren Buffett has with Berkshire Hathaway in Omaha and Nebraska, and finding ways to do what Berkshire Hathaway did with National Indemnity in Europe. And Frederick knows way more about the insurance business that I will ever know, and he says, "Oh yeah, that's just not possible because Switzerland signed up to the pan-European regulations on insurance that were promulgated by the EU. And so there are all sorts of regulations in terms of, for example, how much equities one can hold on your balance sheet. And so that's just not possible." Now, it was not even that Frederick Wolf had said it. It was the way he had said it, the look in his eyes as he said it. And that was just a random conversation that I happened to have on the way back from the Berkshire Hathaway meeting a few years ago. What's my point? I learned something there. I learned that if I'm interested to even attempt to do something similar to what Berkshire Hathaway's done with its insurance business, you can more or less forget about doing it in Switzerland. There's got no advantage to doing it. So I learned a lot just from that simple conversation. What's my point to you in trying to answer the question, how do you find those kind of gems to hold in the portfolio for the long term, with great difficulty, but the more you apply yourself, the more you try and find clues, the more you have conversations, the more likely you are to find that thing, or know where not to look, if you like. So, that's kind of a non-answer, a rambling non-answer to the question. How did I do?
You did great. Would you add Ferrari there as well, up there with Costco and Berkshire?
I was really sort of I had a lot of fun when I heard Warren Buffett mention Ferrari in the maybe it was last year's Berkshire Hathaway meeting. And he was saying something about some company. He said it's like Ferrari, something like that. He said, and he knew what a Ferrari was. In the same, you should know that I noticed at the same meeting, maybe it's last year, I was pointing it out to a friend, or they were pointing out to me that Warren Buffett wears a Rolex. He doesn't wear a Swatch or some Timex or something. He's got a Rolex on his hand. At least at that meeting he did, and I'm pretty sure he wears a Rolex every day. So he wears a piece of jewelry. Another thing before I try and answer your question is that at our lunch, Monish's and my lunch, I own a Porsche 911. It's the same 911 that I've owned for the last, where is it now? 18 years. We got it. I got it in the year that my son was born. And the night before the lunch with Buffett, I've driven Monish and his two daughters around. They're sitting in the back seat. It's a convertible around New York City, which is a lot of fun because in convertible, you kind of see all the skyscrapers and everything. And so Monish decides to bring up the fact that I have a Porsche to Warren Buffett at the lunch just for fun, just to needle me a little bit. And it's amazing because I'm not sure if Warren knew what a Porsche was and didn't give a shit, didn't give a damn because it's really not important to him, or he had no clue what a 911 was. But it was so interesting to me that it just didn't register with him at all. So anyway, the reason why you brought up Ferrari is that it's in my portfolio, and somebody I know well who knows a lot about this said it trades at infinite earnings, if you like, so in terms of a multiple of earnings. And I've always asked myself why, because I feel like I've started to understand a lot about how luxury brands operate, and Warren Buffett doesn't have any of those luxury businesses in Berkshire Hathaway. In some way, one could say that maybe Borsheim's, the jeweler, is kind of some kind of luxury brand, but not really. And I think that, so I don't know, I really don't know. If you take the IKEA culture or the Costco culture, or even another one that we didn't bring up, but Interactive Brokers is potentially another one, they're just like trying, the management and the team are trying all the time to look for the best value for the customer. You know, Costco is trying to deliver stuff that people want in the stores at a very, very low cost to them. And they're trying to find ways to work with the suppliers to deliver that to them. The same with IKEA in furniture. But Ferrari is doing something very, very different to that. It's trying to, create desire for these beautiful cars that they make. And that is a creative thing. That is a thing that seems to me to be less stable and less easy to define as a management team and as a leadership team than doing something that Costco does. So I think that it doesn't bother me. It's interesting to me that Warren, and I know he thinks out 50 years. It's not clear to me that Warren truly understands how these luxury brands operate, because I didn't understand it until I owned Ferrari in the fund, and then I developed a friendship with the owner of an art gallery here in Zurich, who really helped me to see what drives these luxury purchases and how different they are and how deep a human need they meet. But at the end of the day, Warren Buffett doesn't hold those kind of companies in Berkshire Hathaway, and if I was pushed, I would say that it's a far more difficult thing to manage, because you have to continuously be creative and continuously refresh the brand. Having said that, I think that in 50 years' time, there will be people who want to spend vast amounts of money showing what a beautiful sports car they have, because that's what gets the girl or something like that. And so I think it's worthy of a place in my portfolio. But as I write in my most recent letter to investors, because of the infinite valuation, I've been selling it down all the way along and left a lot of money on the table as a result. So I find, maybe it's because I live in Switzerland, the whole world of luxury brands really, really fascinating. And I didn't understand it when I first lived here, but now I understand a lot more of it. So who knows? Maybe I'll end up owning more luxury brands in my portfolio. We'll see. How did I do?
Yeah, great. It's we're at the top of the Maslow pyramid, I guess, with they're fulfilling some needs on that, and as long as the human ingenuity and will grow as a global economy, I guess they could do well. So I was curious, do you think that... A
big question for you, before you go to the next question, have you ever driven in a Ferrari?
No.
So, if you get the chance, I've never owned a Ferrari. So I only drove once when Monish Pabrai had a Ferrari. He doesn't have one anymore. But, you can rent them for the day, or maybe you can, at your young age, are you married?
Soon.
Soon. Okay. Your wife won't like it very much. But look, the one time I drove so just what's interesting is that, I meet John Elkann at these kind of like Buffett brunch that we used to be invited to. He doesn't do them anymore. And John Elkann's there. And John says, you should buy a Ferrari. And I said, I own a Porsche. I mean, I've done that. I don't need that. He looks at me and he says, Ferrari is a completely different animal. And I say, of course he's going to say that. He's the chairman of Ferrari, and he owns the shares and everything. So, and then a few years later, Monish owns a damn whatever it is, and he gives me the keys, and I drive him down the highway. I'm driving 55 miles per hour because it's the highway in Southern California. The number of both men and women, primarily women, whose faces turned and looked at me driving that stupid Ferrari is just, it blew me away, actually. It really was something that I didn't understand until I was in that situation. And so somebody said to me, why do you own Ferrari when you can own Porsche at a much lower valuation, or Aston Martin? What I've learned is they're very, very different animals. So sometimes you really need to get into the brand experience to understand what it does for the individual. So yeah, but if you ever get the chance, even if it's just rent it for a day, and you do it, then, and if you have an unusual experience, please write to me and tell me, because I want to see if it either confirms or disconfirms what I'm telling you. So enjoy. Yeah. Next question. Now you can go to your next question. Thank you.
That sounds great. I will. Maybe on the wedding day, I can rent a Ferrari.
Actually, I wouldn't do it on your wedding day. You've got too many other things to do. Like do it some other time when like rent it to take for your honeymoon, for example, something like that. So
yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, but I think you're touching on something really important there. But do you think that in 50 years maybe the cars will fly?
it's a great question, and because I owned for a period of time a Harley Davidson, and it was just a goal of mine. I decided, life's not complete if you've not, for a short period of time at least, not owned a Harley Davidson. And I was going around saying, hey, this is the greatest brand on the planet. They tattoo the name of the brand into people's arms. So like, how good can it get? And the first piece of disconfirming evidence that I got was actually at the Berkshire Hathaway meeting, where during the financial crisis, 2008-9, Warren Buffett, or Berkshire Hathaway, lent money to Harley Davidson, but didn't buy the shares. The shares were very, very cheap. And it was really interesting to me. I knew that Warren Buffett understood the brand at least well enough that he could have bought the shares as well, or he could have done what he'd done with some of the banks, which was lend money to them, but actually also take options. And he wasn't interested. He just lent money to them. And I thought, why would Warren Buffett not do that? And when you look at Harley Davidson today, the brand has real problems. And an older generation, my generation, have these romantic ideas about Harley Davidson, but it doesn't seem to have transferred to a younger generation. So will that be the same for Ferrari? And I think it's less likely than with Harley Davidson, but there's a doubt that I cannot erase. So I think that it's a great question. I can give all the arguments why I don't think that's the case, but at the end of the day, I can't completely rule it out. I cannot. But and it's worth saying, look, it's a trite distinction, but we were talking about different perspectives, and one perspective that we have to be clear on is this idea between stay rich investing and get rich investing. If you would have been able to just own a piece of Manhattan, a share of Manhattan, all those years ago. And they say that, the value of Manhattan has grown, I don't know what, 4%, 5% per year. I don't know what it is. You'd be an extraordinarily wealthy person. But that's kind of like stay rich investing. So, so again, what are you trying to do? And it's just important to bear in mind what one's trying to do. I actually would say that Ferrari is not stay rich investing or get rich investing. It's kind of like had its run, if you like. It's gone to actually, no, sorry. Ferrari sells 15,000 or so, less than 15,000 cars a year. And I think it's easily possible that Ferrari in the future, with a population of the planet that's 7 or 8 billion, could sell 100,000 cars a year and still be an extraordinarily exclusive brand and have a lot of money to spend on making it very, very central to the culture. Something, again, I mean, it's so much fun talking about that company. It really blows me away, and I wish I'd actually spent more time with it and bought the shares. What Formula One has done with that brand is just extraordinary. And of course, Ferrari's carried by that. And these people like Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc and others are very central to the culture of driving, at least, and popular culture. They're at least as popular as the people like Lionel Messi and Ronaldo and whoever else. So I think that there's a much better chance that Ferrari stays central to the culture than, for example, Harley Davidson. And there's a good chance that Harley Davidson does get turned around. On that front, and because I'm just like having fun talking about it, Jochen Zeitz, who was and maybe still is the CEO of, I think it's Puma, which is a shoe company, became the CEO of Harley Davidson. He's clearly a fan himself, but he hasn't yet figured out the formula. He still has to kind of like figure it out. So we'll see. But Ferrari has a better chance, I think.
You have a quote, I don't know who said it, but Formula One needs Ferrari more than Ferrari needs Formula One. And that's kind of a huge moat with that branding power they've got.
It's fascinating. I mean, I think that Formula One pays Ferrari $40 million a year just to be in the race. And it's the only company that they pay to be in the race. And there's this thing that, Formula One, actually, interesting enough, so Ferrari's got the color red and the color yellow. Nobody else can dominate the color red or yellow. So what have you left with? And Red Bull is kind of like got red, but it's not the same as, and Red Bull's team, not that I follow it that closely, has done extraordinarily well. But somehow we know that Red Bull is a drink and Ferrari is an actual car company. So there's an authenticity there with Ferrari that nobody else can get around, it seems to me. Having said that, I mean, another, interesting enough, so Lewis Hamilton, I don't the fuck know why he's such a great driver, but it seems that he is. And he did amazing things with Team Mercedes-Benz. But now he's come home to Ferrari. And somehow, he said himself that was his childhood dream. And it kind of like looks so right and real that he's come home to Ferrari. And there's something that it took me so long to understand. With these luxury brands have to have a story, and there's an authenticity to the story. And, the story of Ferrari with, I don't know, Enzo, and I don't know the full story, but it's a story that people know. And now Lewis Hamilton has become a part of that story. And there's an authenticity there that people really just buy into and makes meaning for people. I mean, all those Tifosi fans, they have meaning that they don't have if Ferrari didn't exist, And so think of this. And this is where I started to really kind of understand deeply, maybe, luxury brands, is that in Roman and Greek times, we had the gods in the temples, gods in the various temples. And, that got taken away for a while by the advent of Christianity, where it was just one god and maybe, and then with the Renaissance, in a way, it came back because with humanists and you could again paint naked bodies, and you could have this beautiful art that came along in the Renaissance. But that kind of mindset of the gods, the almighty gods in the temple, has been transformed into luxury brands. When people buy Hermes, it's the name of a freaking god, or when they associate with Ferrari or the other luxury brands, they're in a way they're doing the same thing that ancient people did when they visited the temple. And there's a deep human need for that. And somehow these for-profit companies have tapped into that and are doing it in a way that is, in a way, harmless. I mean, so somebody spends a lot of money on a Hermes handbag, or some rich guy spends a lot of money on a Ferrari. We're not doing bad in the world. It's not like you're selling guns to teenagers who might go up, shoot up a shopping mall. You're doing something that is fun for them and harmless while you're making an enormous amount of money. It's not just fun. You're giving those people deep meaning for their lives, because they're, secular people. They don't go to the temple anymore, but boy, do they like their Ferrari brand or their Hermes handbag or whatever else it is. So it's an interesting world to explore.
It certainly is, and I see the time is just flying here, Guy. I have one question that I want us to touch a little bit about the topic of volatility, which has been, the markets have been volatile of late. But what advice would you give to new investors about managing their emotions and psychological biases when it comes to investing, to prohibit them from doing bad things?
Yeah. And it's so funny. Of course, it's an excellent question. And as you know, where I'm going to go first, I'm going to say that, first of all, it's really difficult. And the first thing is not, I think that I would say to an investor is, don't be aware that you're going to psych yourself out. And that is a natural thing that you're going to do. So you're going to, it's nice to call it volatility. Basically, you're going to buy something that's going to go down by 50%, assume that's going to happen. But then something else is going to happen. You're going to feel like a fucking fool. And you're going to hate yourself. And you're going to realize that you put too much money into that stock, even though before you bought and during the time that you were buying, you didn't think that you were putting too money into the stock. So that is just a given. It's a given that it's going to happen. And prepare yourself now for it. And every single person says, no, I'm not going to do that, because I'm going to study, I'm going to be wise, I'm going to make the right selections, I'm going to manage my psychology and all of those things. And hey, presto, 6 months later, 2 years later, 5 years later, at some point you realize that you've done that. So just accept that every single person goes through that experience of hating oneself for having bought something that has gone down, or having not sold something when it was up when you should have sold it. And so that's part of the journey, and just accept that. A second thing I would say is be kind to yourself. So be forgiving, forgive yourself for doing that. Understand that everybody does it. There's no shame to it. And Warren Buffett, I've not got a memory of him saying it on tape, but he acknowledges of making huge mistakes. I mean, he made an investment in a Australian insurance company which got wiped out. I think it was written down to zero. At some point, they had investments in Russia were wiped out to zero. So it happens even to the best of us. So know that it's going to happen. And it's part of the process. And I guess the last thing I would say is that, and Tolkien, a friend of mine was telling me that I need to read Tolkien again. And I do. I'm going to read it rather than just watch the movie. And, one of the kind of, the way he's describing the story, we're faced with tests constantly. And we never, ever, we think that the last test is the last one we're going to be tested on, life test, and we're not going to have any more. The human condition is to be tested. And just as we think that we've mastered it, and all the tests that when we, in my case, I thought that the fund invested in a company called Horsehead, and Horsehead went bankrupt. The investment went down to zero. 10% of my fund went down to zero. I was so ashamed. I felt awful. 1,000 different things. I can tell more about the story. I thought that was the last test I'd ever have. But life throws up new and more difficult tests for you. So, but I think that if we see it as a test, so it's going to happen. It's going to be a test. It's going to be difficult. You know, Warren Buffett, I saw a quote recently about Charlie Munger. It's like, sort of like, if you assume life's going to be difficult and you're going to be tested to the extreme, then you won't be so unhappy in life. So, but if you see it as a test, and now your job is to show up to that test in the best possible way, then maybe that is helpful. I know that when I've gone through trying periods, both in my life and in the portfolio, reading Marcus Aurelius has helped me. So that's this kind of Stoic philosopher who was also a Roman emperor. You know, I also think of, and there's so many heroes that one can think of. I recently was thinking of, you know, Moses. God shows up to Moses and he says, you know, I want you to lead my people out of bondage and slavery in Egypt to freedom. And Moses says, who, me? He says, I can't even speak well. I have a speech defect. And God says, yeah, it's you. And, you know, and then another story, I don't know why I go to biblical stories these days. You know, God comes to the prophet Jonah and he says, you've got to, I don't know what he's got to do in Nineveh, but he's got to go to Nineveh, which is somewhere in, I don't know, somewhere in Turkey these days, I think is the physical location. And Jonah says, I'm not going anywhere freaking near where you want me to go. I want to run away as far as I can. And, you know, and he goes on the boat and he's swallowed by the whale. And eventually he does go to Nineveh and he does what God wanted of him. So what's my point? I think that we often want to run from our fate. We don't want to show up to it because for good reasons, we're scared of it. We don't want to face up to what is being put in front of us. And actually, the human condition is that our most meaningful lives are lived when we don't run away from that and we show up to it. And that means showing up to the mistakes in the portfolio when it happens, because it will happen. But above all, show up in a way that you can, so you don't show up and beat yourself up. You don't show up and wear sackcloth. You don't show up and say, I'm a sinner, I'm going to hellfire forever and ever and ever. You show up with kindness, understanding, respect for oneself, knowing that everybody feels vulnerable, everybody feels fear, everybody feels absolutely useless and in the face of the challenge that has just been created. But somehow you'll get through it, you know? And maybe the last thing I'll say, because, and this is, again, forgive me for all my biblical references, but I'm very inspired by Jordan Peterson, who helped me to see the Bible, and by a guy called Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell was a professor at a place called Sarah Lawrence College, and he has written a book called The Hero's Journey. And all of Jordan Peterson's books are both worth reading. But so, you know, the way to read the Bible, myths, the Iliad, any great literature is not that it's real, but that it kind of like presents a model of the hero as he goes through life's trials. So Moses, in this particular story, his he's follows God's word. He says, okay, I'm not going to run from you. I have a speech defect. I'm going to do what you tell me. I'm going to try and lead these stiff-necked people out of Egypt. And you know what? He gets out of Egypt, got through the plagues. The Pharaoh's men are after them with their chariots, and they face the frickin' Red Sea. And Moses turns to God and says, what now? We're all going to drown, you know? And the way that I'm imagining the story, God says, take the fucking step, just take a step. And Moses said, we all drown. And, you know, in the story, the sea parts, you know, and I think that in many cases in life, we don't know, if we just take another step. We know we have to take a step. We're just human. We don't know everything, but we just take that step. And somehow, somewhere, the sea parts, but we just have to be brave and do it, basically. So that's something I take out of that story. And so, yes, volatility will happen. And what you need to do is to be brave, not lose your intelligence, not go on autopilot, make intelligent choices as you go along, and somehow the sea will part and you'll get to the other side.
Yeah, that's excellent reflections. And as we go through life and have trials and errors, and part of the error part is to experience pain and suffering, and it's how you deal with those instances that determines whether you're gonna be a long-term winner or just lay down and feel sorry for yourself. And I think that's a very powerful message, and it resonates really well with me that we can use stories to find strength to overcome those difficult periods. Yeah, that's really fascinating.
If I may just wax lyrical on that, and it was Monish who first turned me onto it. He said something which I wanted to disbelieve, but I think is probably true. He said, "You can be a mass murderer. God forbid that you should be, but nobody listening to this should be. But people care less about the crimes you committed or the mistakes that you made than they care about your ability to be honest about what happened and to show up fully." And my experience with Horsehead was that I'd made terrible mistakes, but I wrote about it as honestly as I could, and I did the best I could to show up to the challenges that I faced and not hide away from them. And I mean, and then people forgive you. And so time and again, I think that what I've found is that the first thing that happens is when crisis happens, you just want to run away and bury yourself. And if I may, I know I'm expanding this and maybe it's too long, but the first thing I want to say is that's okay. You are allowed to run away or to want to run away. You don't have to be brave in the first instance. You can bury yourself for a while. You can just hide. You can feel sorry for yourself. You can say, why is this happening to me? And I don't deserve this. And I've done everything in my power not to have this happen. So be kind to yourself. Don't say, oh, I'm not allowed to run away because I'm not brave. No, run away for a while, but then slowly come back and chunk down the problem into smaller pieces and try and break it down and try to see what you can show up to and what you can be honest to. And it might be a process of days, weeks, months, years, but do that. And when you do that, I have an experience I've experienced multiple times this example, and it's like, whether you want to call it God or the universe or the Almighty, whatever it is, providence, like you get a feeling that you're doing something right, God smiles at you. For example, when I wrote about my experiences in Horsehead, and I saw that my investors in the fund they understood that I'd made a mistake and that they're capable of making mistakes, and they didn't withdraw the money from the fund. There was kind of like God smiling at me. And I did spend a certain period of time just hating myself for having clearly made a mistake. So I hope that's helpful. Back to you.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, and like to learn and grow is the best way to to go forward. So we were very curious. You have obviously through the episode provided us with a lot of good insights and the reading recommendations, but we were very curious to ask you what you're currently reading now and what we should read. Investing wise.
Just again to expand on that point, from a dinner that I was at last night, where somebody, one half of them, and one of you's going to get married soon, so this will be helpful. Maybe is that so the couple are having a fight about something, and in this case, their boyfriend and girlfriend, they don't know if they're going to get married and attempt to spend the rest of their lives together or not. And I was talking to the one side of the couple, and I said, there's an issue here that you have to explore. There's an issue of jealousy. And I said, I think that what I would want to say to the other side is, look, we're dealing with something here. We don't know what the future holds for us, but I think that the story we want to tell about the differences of opinion that we have is that we both learned something. We're both changed. we have a story not about each other, about who we are, but the fight that we're having, that we can, the fight was worthwhile, if you like. The struggle was worthwhile. We learned something about ourselves and the world through that struggle. We're something else on the other side. And so I think that's true about every single, assume that you're going to be rich, assume you're going to have enough money. What is the story you're going to tell about the struggle you're having with your portfolio and the decisions that you're making? What did you learn? How did you progress as a human being? So anyway, it's kind of like a beautiful take on it, because if you're not learning in a deep spiritual sense, what actually are you doing? And because it's not your most meaningful life. And I think that it's a way that all the people who are successful investors for a very long period of time, they do that. They kind of see that kind of inner spiritual journey or struggle, if you like. So yeah, anyway, but books that I'm reading right now. So you've got me in my office right now, and too many books is not enough. There's actually, I'll send you a link, or you can ask me for it and I'll give it to you. Most of my library is on Library Thing. So you can see all the books that I own pretty much, or a large number of them. And basically, any book that I come across, whether it's in reading in The Economist or a review in the FT or a book that somebody mentions, most of them, I put them on my wish list, and sooner or later I buy them and they go into my inbox of something to read. And I have this idea that first of all, the anti-library, or the bookshelf of the unread books, and each book is presenting itself as a potential for me to spend time with it. And so my inbox is pretty much, I wouldn't say infinite, but there are a lot of books that I would like to have read and reading. And these are ones behind me. I mean, I was discussing this book yesterday with Amar Bida, which is all about storytelling and what storytelling, what the nature of storytelling that happens inside court cases and inside legal reasoning. And so there are dozens of books here that I would like to have read. I mean, where is it here? Why did this come up? I've been reading about the Renaissance, this guy Bernd Rock, and I wanted to see, this is if I'm not mistaken, it was a translation. This is the Geneva Bible, a very, very famous version of the Bible. I wanted to see it, so I got a copy of it, and I don't know if I'll ever look at it, but it's there. So, I mean, on the nonfiction side, this guy called Brett Gardner just wrote a book about Warren Buffett's early investments, and I think it's really, really good. And he goes in depth into like a number of early investments of Warren Buffett before Berkshire Hathaway was around. And I think that I'm partway through, and I've learned an awful lot from it. And I think he's going to come and speak at VALUEx BRK, which will be live streamed. So perhaps we'll get more insights there. A book that I just saw it on my shelves, so maybe I'll put it down for you just for fun. I don't know if this is, are you going to share the video of this? Is this just podcast?
It's just us.
Yeah, so there's no point in me showing you books, but the Caesar's Palace Coup, you can see it. It's can you see that up there? That's somebody mentioned it to me, and I decided that I'd read part of it and I wanted to go in and read it again. It kind of shows the huge egos that exist in the distressed debt world. So that's on my reading list. On the I just read the autobiography of Bibi Netanyahu, and that was because a friend mentioned it. And before that, I'd read a fiction book by a guy called Joshua Cohen called The Netanyahus, which is a blue book that I hated the book. I hated the story. I think the guy does a really nasty job, although he's a really, really good writer. But that got me into reading about this kind of like very foundational leader in the state of Israel called Zev Jabotinsky, who's written a novel called The Five, and I'm reading a biography of his. The bottom line is, and here's what. So I've just mentioned a few, and you can drill down and make me go in one direction or another, and I'll try and come up with more books. I think that I could pick up a book at the wrong time, and it would be meaningless to me. And if I try to force myself to read it, it's just a waste of time. And I knew very little of European history, but this Professor Bernd Rock, I don't know what he did to me, but his history of the Renaissance, combined with having met him, and I feel like I'm getting his view of the Renaissance, and because he just charmed me, I'm at once learning about the Renaissance and I'm learning about him. It drew me in, and it was the right book at the right time for me, and so I started reading that. Now that's 1,400 pages. I've been reading it over the last year or so far, so I read a certain amount every day. But what's my point to you and the audience is, I want to maximize the chance that the book that I'm holding in my hand is the right book for me to read right now. And just because I recommend a book to you doesn't mean that it's the right book for you to read right now. That's for you to discover. And the only way I know to do that is to have them around and have them in my hand. And what I often do, by the way, is, so I buy Lucky Amazon. I buy it on Amazon, and I buy the Kindle version, because late at night when we've put the lights out, I don't want to wake my wife up, so I read it on the Kindle. But I still want the physical copy of the book, because that reminds me that it exists. I don't want to just look for it in my Kindle. And there's something about, the physical, each book is different. And so the physical reminders of what the book looks like helps me to remember whether I want to read it or not. So, and forgive me, because I seem to be rambling a lot, but I see the library as a kind of like a cocktail party full of hundreds of people. And it's so beautiful because I can pull any book off the shelves, and that's like having a cocktail party conversation. I can flip through and I can decide whether I want to take that book and spend more time with that book. The cocktail party equivalent is if I want to take that person and say, well, should we go for a coffee or lunch or dinner? Because I really want to dig deeper into what they have to offer me. My niece, and I'll close with this and come back to you. My niece was in our living room, and of course there's a big pile of the bookshelf, not dissimilar to what you see behind me. And she noticed a book. I don't remember what book it was. And she said, oh, do you mind if I take it down and read it? And I kind of said, mind. The whole point of it being there was for you to take it down. And then I said this to her, and I hope that it resonated with her and she took something away with it. I said, look, of all the 300 or 400 books that are on that shelf, that one stood out to you. The spine of that book stood out to you. And I said, there's a reason for that. And your job is to discover why. And only you will know why that book stood out to you. And don't assume that that's random. There's a reason why your mind focused on that book. And I'm not saying that you have to read it cover to cover. You may just have to flip through it, read a few chapters, read the back cover. But treat that as a significant event in your life. Don't treat that as a nothing. So, and I think I'm convinced that I have something, that there's something correct about what I'm sharing about how one should approach the decision as to which book to spend time with. So, sorry, because it just comes up for me, and I think it's relevant and helpful. I think, yeah, go ahead.
I think you're spot on, because it's like when me and my spouse is kind of flipping some TV channels and we want to find a movie to watch, and she's in a totally different mood than I am, and that comes to books as well. As you pointed out, a lot of books that I've read doesn't kind of feels too heavy for me because I'm not in the right mood. But if I read it when I am in the mood, the book becomes much better. I get the perception from the author as well.
And now we have the two things that are helpful to me. So I read in parallel the book in the physical copy, and at night when I'm in bed, I read it in the Kindle version. Sometimes I really try and read a foreign language book if I can in the original language. If it's in German and French, I can do a pretty good job of it. And then I have a rule that I'll read the French or the English version first, but then I'll read the English version. So if it's a book in German, I'll read the German version. But if I'm not understanding it fully, then I'll read the English version because it's so easy to get both copies on the Kindle. Or if I'm reading the German version on the Kindle, it's so easy. If there's a word I don't fully understand, I can tap on it and there's the dictionary right there instantly. And then there's another thing that I do most recently. So last night I was reading. So I mean, do you guys know who the Fugger was? So very briefly, Fugger was a banker in the early or middle of the Renaissance. He lived in Augsburg, and he was the richest man on the planet. And anybody who wants to study capitalism should read him. So I'm learning about this from Bernd Rock's book. And I'm looking, oh my, I'm finally figuring out who this Fugger guy was. I'd heard about him before. And then, so parallel, I go, I stop reading and I go to, in my go-to AI, Perplexity. And because I don't think that Bernd Rock's told me enough about how he did his banking and finance and how he lent to the Catholic Church of all people, of all institutions. So I go to Perplexity and I say, tell me about Fugger's methods, how he got security for his loan, what interest rates did he charge, what were his methods in collecting, because he didn't have a modern legal system. So I'm reading, but I'm also just learning about a subject and using all the resources. And then I typed into Perplexity, hey, this Fugger guy is really, really interesting. What biographies about Fugger are there to read? And it turns out that an analyst for a firm called Rowan Cunniff, which is very closely associated with Warren Buffett, called Greg Steinmetz, wrote a book about Fugger. And it turns out that I have it on my shelves, but I haven't yet read it. So now I've got it in my inbox to read Greg Steinmetz's stock analyst book about Fugger. And of course, now I'm going to be all over that book. I just need to find it. And I'm not sure where it is. I might have to find a second copy. So anyway, what's my point? We had school teachers, probably all of us, who told us that we needed to take the book that they've given us and read it from beginning to end. And my answer is no. Take the book that's most relevant and read the bits that make it most interesting for you. And it's your search. You're in control. Your curiosity is what counts. It's your journey, nobody else's journey. And don't let even the author of the book tell you what you should read next.
Yeah, I think that's a really inspiring and insightful way to end the episode. Thank you, Guy. This has been great. We're very thankful that you wanted to spend some time with us today and discuss a lot of very interesting subjects on both finance, but on humanity in a broader sense and and the human experience, which we all share. This has been great. So we thank you for your time and sharing of your knowledge.
Well, you do me a great honor in thinking that I have something to share, and I feel my ego is stroked slightly a lot by the fact that you're willing to listen to me. We started this podcast talking about differences in perspective, and I want to share with you that when you get, when you're 30 years older, you'll realize that what you thought was a lot of wisdom is just 30 years more experience. So don't. It's just that I'm looking at life in part from a different angle. I'm not that much smarter. In fact, I'm convinced that to all intents and purposes, my intelligence is the same as yours, everybody listening, and it's just a little bit more perspective. But you do me great honor to listen to me, and I hope that I've been helpful to everyone. And I've had a lot of fun. I think you asked a great question, so thank you. Tusen
No, really. That's super pronunciation. Well, Guy, this is the once in a lifetime privilege, really. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and time. Time is a commodity that you can't put a price on.
Well, it's very kind of you, and if you're in Berkshire, come and say hi to me.
I will. I'm actually going to Switzerland this summer.
Oh, well, I can't guarantee I'll be here, but certainly get in touch with Chantal, and if it works out, I'll be. I like to go swimming in the lake, so maybe I'll take you swimming in the lake. Who knows?
I have actually family living in Estavayer-le-Lac, which is by the lake, so in the French region of Switzerland. So I'm quite often there, and if I'm in Zurich, I'll send an email. But don't feel. I hope you don't feel me that I'm nagging on you or something like that.
If it works out, it works out, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But there's no harm in trying. So
yeah, and the same goes to you. When you come to the middle of nowhere in Norway, in Trondheim, you're always welcome. Just remind yourself of the guy from the Stock Up podcast.
I will do that. And
Thank you so
let me
much.
know when it goes live. I'll do my best to promote it.
Thank you. We will.
Yeah. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.